This is Wade, and you are in Wade World. We are going to dive further into our regularly scheduled programming. And today, Wade is going to talk about a fascinating subject in which Wade is by no means an expert, very recently came across it. But we have to understand and start off with one simple fact. Whether you're religious or not religious, this video is not about gods or religion. It is about what our ancestors wrote about what they thought were gods, the myths, the stories, and how those stories might actually be telling us what happened in our true history. So here's a thought exercise. Let us suppose today you, an average person with a cell phone, a car, and a wireless charger were transported in the middle of the Amazon rainforest in front of a tribe that had never seen any other human being except its own people, right? And there are tribes like that. What is the first reaction they would have to a person who not only wears amazing clothes, they might not even have developed clothes, but has a magical device and a huge monster that is loud, your car, or if it's electric, a big shiny, you know, machine. Or they don't even know machine, right? So the big shiny creature, and something that has power from your hand with wireless charger. What would they think of you as? From their perspective, you would be God. And we have historical records of this. When the British first landed in Hawaii, the Hawaiian natives who had literally lived in an island paradise their whole life. So, not a lot of IQ development going on when you're comfortable, remember? So, the native Hawaiians literally thought that these dirty sailors were gods. They worshipped them and they sent their daughters and women to mate with them so that they could get divine DNA. This is not even a joke, this is historically true. Because the Hawaiians were at such a primitive level that they couldn't even think that there is anything beyond the sea. The sea was just an impassable ocean, impassable body of water. To see some beings come in a vessel across this impassable universe of water was a miracle to them. So this applies and Wade is going to go through most of the religions, but this also applies to an analysis of the ancient Sumerian religions. Now, why is this the most interesting? Because if we look at the ages of the religions, the major religions, then we would say the youngest, unless there are some new religions popping up, has been Islam. Older than Islam is Christianity. Older than Christianity was the Roman religion, were the European religions, the Nordic religions. Older than Romans and these religions were the Greek religions, and the Greeks, ancient Aryan religion, Vedic religion, not today's Hinduism, but ancient Aryan Vedic religion, ancient Iranian Persian religion, going back even further. So we're already like 5,000 years ago now at this point in time. Ancient India, so there's not in India, ancient Aryan Vedic religion, ancient, no Iran there, so there was the ancient Aryan, another offshoot of their religion, Zoroastrianism, right? We're 5,000 years ago. So ancient Greece. Go back further, ancient Egypt. Go back even further, ancient Sumeria. And Sumeria was followed by Babylon. So Mesopotamia came after Sumeria. So ancient Egypt, ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Sumeria. And we're still finding out more and more, and older relics and older civilizations. So humanity is a species with amnesia. It seems we might not have just come into being 6,000 years ago, but maybe millions of years ago, and we keep going through these cycles of getting destroyed, various versions. So anyway, we're like right at ancient Sumerian religion, right? And maybe there is a religion or two that is older that we have found, but we have not been able to translate what they're saying. And specifically, this applies to new evidence about European human beings that were older than ancient Sumer, which had writings and records, but we can't decipher them. And then you hit 12,500 years ago, where the world was flooded massively. Now, you don't have to think about Christianity or Islam or Judaism or the Greeks or the ancient Aryans, Vedic religions. They all talk about a flood. Ancient Egyptians, they talk about a flood. Ancient Sumerians actually talk about a flood. But this 12,500 year ago, the flood, now we have actual scientific proof. So science just keeps confirming the existence of what we call God, gods, and mythology. There's something there. So 12,500 years ago, massive flood probably wiped out almost all of humanity. And not just one flood, this was among many floods. Because even in the plays the Greeks wrote about ancient Greeks going to Egypt for archaeology, the Egyptians, on the Egyptian journey, they came across many temples where the priest said, yes, they were Atlanteans and they were destroyed in a flood. And the Greeks said, oh, we heard about this flood. And the priest said, Manetho is one of the very, very excellent sources from that time. And the priest said, you just know about one flood. There have been many floods. So if we chart this back, right, so we're going back in time now, back before the Greeks, back before the ancient Aryans, going back, ancient Egyptians, and interestingly, one of the most coveted professions in ancient Egypt during the Pharaoh's time was ancient archaeology. So the Pharaoh's time was full of people digging for even older civilizations, thousands of years old. So imagine 6,000 years ago, they were digging for civilizations that were 12,000 years older than them. This is a historical fact, right? So we're going back in time. So we've hit ancient Egypt, the pharaohs, that came upon the pyramids, which Wade can bet any amount of money, 100%. The pharaohs and their people did not design any of these pyramids or the sphinxes. The pyramids they did design, we can see a massive difference between the structure of the pyramids they discovered and claimed, yes, trust me, bro, we made it, versus the pyramids they actually designed that looked like absolute crap, absolute rubbish. So we're going back in time. We've hit ancient Egypt 6,000 years ago, right? Now we're going back in time, ancient Mesopotamia, and we hit ancient Sumer. Now, in ancient Sumeria, their Sumerian gods are fascinating. And the story goes something like this. It's a beautiful, beautiful myth structure that really there's something there. So in ancient Sumeria, the gods, chief of which was Enlil, and the most helpful towards humans was called Enki. Enki. So the gods had a history of their own in Sumeria. So the Sumerian mythology says that the gods, before they were gods, they lived as man. So this, if we take it from a very objective perspective, is talking about a group, a species, a group of beings that basically unlocked the genetic key to immortality. Not indestructibility, but immortality with eternal youth. And if you're scientific, look at telomeres and the research in them and how they age us and make us die. So it's a design with us, we age. So anyway, we're in ancient Sumer about 7,500 years ago. And the mythology says the gods before they were gods used to work. But the gods discovered immortality. And then they shared it with all the gods and became gods. So this was a species that discovered immortality, and then everybody became immortal. Shortly after, there was a higher class of gods and a lower class of gods. So don't think of them as gods, think of them as a species, a higher class of species and a lower class of the same species, right? Elite class and a worker class. So the worker gods, the worker class, rebelled, and there was going to be a civil war because they were rightfully so saying, hey, we're so advanced that we have become immortal. Why the hell are we still working? Why do we have to work? To avoid the civil war, Enlil, the chief of that species, decided to create men, human beings, for work. And you can look at the mythology. Man was created in the image of the gods, with the blood of a god. And when the man awoke, not a girl, not a female, a man, he was taught to do work. So the story now progresses after some time. So none of the god species are working. After some time, the man and the men they created became very demotivated, lethargic, and didn't want to work. And when the gods figured out the problem was the men wanted more in life than just work. Their entire existence was work. And I'm going to tell you, Wade is going to tell you a shocking thing about us. We're the men that these gods designed. Shocking. So the gods came up with the idea that hey, we're the god species. We have males and females. Let's design a female from the man. That's where all the story comes out. The female comes from the man's loins, the ribs, blah blah blah, whatever. So they designed the female, and that fixed the problem. Now the men were like, wow, I have a girl. All the men were happy. They had a purpose in life. They would work, worship the gods, grow their family, and see the children. However, there was a problem. And before we go into the problem, here's a shocking fact about the man that they designed. This is a fact, and research will prove it. Initially, these are god species, right? They are immortal, so they are genetically extremely advanced. They made man extremely long lived. So think about us creating robots. Would you like a robot that just falls apart in 10 years? No, right? If you actually want a good robot and don't want to just scam other people for money and replace their robots, you would make very long lasting robots that are capable of self repair. So the gods made human beings, us, very long lasting. Without any concrete knowledge, we can easily say we were designed to last 100,000 years in prime of our life. And one of the very contested historical evidences for this is the Sumerian king list, which is basically a list of the kings of Sumeria. And a lot of these kings early on, they ruled for 72,000 years, 60,000 years, 50,000 years, 45,000 years, 57,000 years. How is that possible? Unless you naturally have a very long lived life. So, after designing man, making him work and worship them, they designed girls. Now, man, girl coming together, creating a family civilization. The problem that the gods faced then was there were too many human beings. And in the mythology, they said the humans were making too much of a racket. So Enlil decided to flood the world and destroy all the human beings. Now, this was not a popular decision, but he was the king of the god species. So he decided to flood the world the first time, but Enki helped human beings escape the first time. So the human population was massively devastated by Enlil's flood, but a few humans survived. And again, in some time, again, remember, 100,000 years, very long lived. Again, humans populated. And the gods were okay with it because the gods were getting worshipped and the labor of the human beings was going towards the gods. But Enlil again flooded the world because again, there were too many human beings. And Wade is going to maybe explain the first and second stories of how humans escaped. But this focuses on the last story that brought us to our current situation. And again, Enki, the god, one of the god species, helped human beings to escape. Now, a central figure in the story is Atrahasis or Utnapishtim. He is mentioned in the Epic of Gilgamesh as the immortal old man or the immortal man. So, Atrahasis Utnapishtim was a priest of the gods that went allegedly might have lived through all three floods. How? So, these three floods apparently were within less than a span of 100,000 years. That's how rapidly humans reproduced and how rapidly you advance. Because imagine we are advancing with a 70-year average lifespan. If you had a 100,000-year lifespan, wow, we'd be on the stars. We'd be the humans that designed these actual pyramids that are energy generators and stabilizing the world through seismic balancing and all that. So Atrahasis, the third time, and Enlil was aware that Enki had helped people, so he forbade Enki from talking to human beings. He said, "You messed up my plans two times. I forbid you from talking to the human beings because if you do, the consequences for you will be severe. They are immortal, not indestructible yet." So, what Enki does, and this is the Sumerian myth, is as Atrahasis is going to go to sleep, Enki talks to the wall of his house. So, Enki doesn't talk to Atrahasis, but he talks directly to the wall of his house, and Atrahasis can hear what Enki is saying. And Enki tells him, "Hey, another flood is coming. Build a cube shaped boat. I believe it's 100 feet by 100 feet by 100 feet by 100 feet, something like that. Maybe 30 meters, which again comes to 99 feet. And fill it with all the animals and everybody, and tell everybody you'll give them lots and lots of money." So people finished that boat in maybe 7, maybe 10 days, just before the flood came. And again, if you have to understand how human beings were able to build such a huge structure in 7, 10 days, these human beings were designed to be extremely physically superior, extreme levels of energy, don't get tired easily at all, and live for 100,000 years, right? So Atrahasis basically gathers everybody and says, "Build the boat." And the boat is built, and just before, and then he throws a huge feast because nobody knows that the flood is coming. The god Enki told the wall, "Don't tell everybody because there will be a panic, but rescue all the animals and however many people you can." Again, remember Noah in the Bible, the flood in ancient Aryan Vedic religion, the flood of the world serpent. In ancient Roman and Greek religions, the world was flooded. And all of these religions, same story, right? So, ancient Egyptian, same story. So, Atrahasis gets the boat made, fills it with different animals and species, gets inside with a bunch of people that, whoever he trusts, blocks the boat entrance with pitch, and all this is while the party is happening. He gives a huge party and everybody's feasting and enjoying. They're not really paying attention, and then the flood happens. And this third flood was devastating. The amount of humans left in the entire world were a handful. So, in one way, Enlil actually succeeded, but again, Enki made his plan fail to completion. Now, in this story, Atrahasis sends out birds every day for 7 days, and the last bird that he sends out doesn't come back, which tells him, "Oh, land has appeared." And the moment he hits land, in the story, he starts, opens the door of the barge, and then he gets out and starts sacrificing animals and thanking all the gods. And all the gods are very, very happy that, wow, somebody survived, and they are really, really upset with Enlil. So he's the king of the gods, but kings and lords, right? And one of the goddesses, she blames him. She's like, "Hey, when these other gods, these lower gods, they came to fight with you, why didn't you fight? Why did you create human beings? And after you created them, why do you keep killing them? Don't kill them anymore. No, this is unacceptable. Let them live." So the gods they say it's 7 days, but worship is psychic and mental energy. So this is a realm that might genuinely power the gods. They might genuinely get psychic and mental energy from our worship and all that. So this might be another hint into another level of reality that exists. So the final compromise that was reached after this third failure, because Enlil was furious and he would have killed Enki, the god. But he said, "You've messed up my plans 3 times. So unless you can fix this, I'm never going to. You're done. You're done. You're going to die." And it's not mentioned what Enki did, but Wade theorizes that what Enki did was he said, "All right, let's cut the lifespan of these creatures by 1,000 times." That's drastic, right? So instead of living 100,000 years, you're lucky to live in 100 years. Let's give these creatures, this is Sumerian myths, introduction to pain, death, and suffering from birth. That means the aging process is hyper accelerated. So not only are you living 1,000 times less than you were designed to as human beings, you're living with a weaker system as a weaker species with accelerated aging. So that's like a million times worse. So you live 1,000 times less, age 1,000 times faster. Because if you live 100,000 years, then you probably age 1 year for every 1,000 years, right? And 1 year would be like not sure baby for 1,000 years, but you hit puberty at like 15, 16, 17, and then you're like the same for like 1,000 years. And the third was we will give them pain, suffering, and pain during childbirth. Again, God cursed the Eve with pain during childbirth. So before that, apparently humans were having so many children because hey, it was pleasurable to procreate and it was painless to have children. So there was a lot of children. Makes a lot of sense why they were so long lived and so many human beings. And after this story, the Atrahasis, Utnapishtim, and his wife were rewarded by immortality. So that can only be done by a species that knows how to genetically unlock immortality by changing your DNA. This is the ancient Sumerian mythology viewed through the lens of our current knowledge and reality. Right. Now, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh is a king of Sumeria. And again, he ruled for thousands of years. We'll have to check about that. And eventually, Gilgamesh became so powerful that he was an ally to the gods. Now, there are theories that Gilgamesh was 10 feet tall. He had some partial godly DNA. Maybe he was impregnated by some gods, or there was something done when he was in the womb. Again, harkens back to Jesus Christ, divine Son of God, right? So Gilgamesh, while Gilgamesh is powerful and a king and just, very, very powerful, the most powerful king in the world, a very competent, very strong, 10-foot tall man, the gods are in fear of a wild man that appears. So this is a human being that is not under their control, who has relentless drive, relentless savagery, and relentless strength and violence. And he's just destroying everything that the humans on the sides of gods are. In fact, he's going to challenge their most elite, genetically modified by godly DNA king, Gilgamesh. And they panic. And this man's name is Enkidu. Something there. Enki, the god, Enkidu, the wild man. So Enkidu is just on a rampage and he just keeps winning and winning and winning. So this is a man who doesn't believe in procreation or girls or doing all that. He's just like, I want to conquer. So the gods literally design a perfect female to seduce him, and she seduces him straight up for 6 or 7 days. This is Sumerian mythology. And then he loses his drive and becomes weakened. And she seduces him in all the ways, not just physical, but emotional, psychological, and mental. Like she literally becomes an ideal wife. And then he's defeated by Gilgamesh. So there's something there that if there was a man who channeled his procreative and sexual energy into just his mission, he was unstoppable until he was seduced by girls. There's a lesson in there for ascetics and people who are celibate their entire lives and dedicated to higher things. So, after this, after he was weakened, Gilgamesh was able to defeat Enkidu, but he forgave him and they became best friends. However, because Enkidu was magnificently capable, he was still a threat to the gods.
And he and Gilgamesh went on an adventure which challenged the very power of the gods. They killed the bull of heaven because Gilgamesh rejected the advances of a goddess. Again, this is a hybrid. The gods have designed Gilgamesh as a hybrid between humans and gods. And some goddess found him attractive. He rejected her advances. She sent the bull of heaven to destroy the world and kill Gilgamesh and everybody. And Gilgamesh and Enkidu, they destroyed the godly weapon. So the gods were very angry and they sent a biological weapon, they say a curse, to kill Enkidu. And they killed Enkidu. So this is after Enkidu has been seduced for 7 straight days. His drive, his motivation, his power as a man has been massively reduced. And then he was finally killed by the gods through a curse, which is basically speak for, all right, he's weak enough now, we weaken him. Here's a biological weapon, here's a disease specifically targeted to Enkidu, and Enkidu dies. Now, after Enkidu's death, Gilgamesh becomes very sad because he sees that we are all mortal, even he's mortal. Even if he lives 100,000 years, he has to die someday. And he gets it in his head that if I can defeat the gods' challenge and I can reject goddesses, I deserve to be immortal. So I will find out how to be immortal. Now, the gods were not directly accessible to human beings at all for a long time. So Gilgamesh has to literally go find out, study, and research what was the last point of contact between gods and human beings. And what was it? Atrahasis, the priest, Utnapishtim. So Gilgamesh finds that he lives at the mouth of the 5 rivers. This might be a hint to maybe Antarctica, who knows? This might be a hint to certain location which unlocks the way to the gods or is very, very crucial for control of the world, right? So after much difficulty, he finds Utnapishtim and he says, make me immortal. Remember, Utnapishtim himself could not make anybody immortal because he himself was a human who was made immortal by the god species. I'm pretty sure it's pretty hard for him to figure out what to do. Maybe in infinite time he would have, but he didn't have the power to make anybody immortal. But anyway, he said, fine, I'll give you a couple of tests. First, try not to sleep for 30 days. Now, if you know anything about human biology, you know the fastest thing that will kill you is not the lack of water or food, it's the lack of sleep. We are designed for our CPU to cool down while asleep, right? So Gilgamesh fails that. So Utnapishtim says, fine, try not to drink water for X amount of days. He failed that. He tries not to eat. So he fails the third test. And then Utnapishtim says to him, look, death is in your destiny. If you cannot even stay awake for 30 days, how will you be immortal? Which can be interpreted as Utnapishtim telling him, like, hey, Gilgamesh, you have some divine DNA. But the gods are not stupid. They didn't give you enough divine DNA for you to be able to unlock the genetic potential for immortality. Right? This is our understanding. This is Wade's understanding and Wade's analysis of what Utnapishtim told him, what Atrahasis told him. So Gilgamesh, the story ends, he returns to his kingdom and he makes his peace with the fact that he's going to die. Eventually, he rules for a good amount of time and then he passes away. It's called the Epic of Gilgamesh. Now, this is all a part of ancient Sumerian mythology, ancient Sumerian gods, and the stories that they say. If you look at all major religions around the world, you will see echoes of the same story again and again and again. And we haven't even touched about the nature of the god species. Were they just advanced geneticists like in Prometheus? That, again, if you are primitive enough, you will look at advanced technology as magic, right? So this is a short summary of what the ancient Sumerian mythology and religion tells us. And of all of the mythologies that we have studied, this is the oldest, and this makes the most sense because it explicitly states that the gods were not gods, they became gods, and then they created men. And one final thought that Wade is going to leave you with. The gods were wise enough to create men in their image, but mentally, physically, and lifespan wise, inferior to the gods. And here we are trying to make artificial intelligence, which is mentally way superior to us, faster than us, physically way superior, and pretty much immortal. So, if human beings and humanity and mankind is foolish enough to invent their own demise, then the gods were, in the end, wise. And Enki, even though he was a kind god, was not right, and Enlil was correct. Ancient Sumerian gods. It's a fascinating subject. There are many people who will talk more in detail about this, but it gives us a window into our possible history, recent history. There might be many histories. We might be hundreds of millions of years old. Recently, scientists have discovered the only other time in the Earth's history where industrial metals, which can only be manufactured and not found, they traced these industrial elements in the Earth's crust and they dated them to 125 million years ago. 125 million years ago, imagine. So, how many civilizations have we built and lost? Built and lost, built and lost. And how many versions of us have there been? With these questions, Wade leaves you for today. Until next time, keep it cool, keep it smart, and as always, enjoy.